Are you searching for personal development, motivation, self-help, success? Jeff Bezos. Well, you've come to the right place. Hang on.
Welcome to the Expect Success Podcast, a presentation of GeorgeBollock.com with your host, George Bollock. This podcast is for all things personal development. Don't expect success, prepare for it. Please welcome your host, George Bollock.
Welcome to Expect Success at GeorgeBollock.com. Now, in addition to listening to our podcast, you could also view the video format on YouTube at GeorgeTube.com. Jeffrey Preston Bezos is an American business magnate, media proprietor, and investor, and Bezos is the founder and CEO of the multinational technology company, Amazon. With a net worth of more than $190 billion as of June 2021, he is the richest person in the world, according to both Forbes and Bloomberg Billionaires Index. Anyway, if you're from the planet Earth, you probably already know who Jeff is. And on today's show, Jeff shares a story from his childhood that shaped his personality and helped him become as successful as he is today. Listen to Jeff.
So my grandfather stopped the car and he took me out of the car, and I had no idea what was about to happen because he had never said a cross word to me. And I thought he might actually be angry with me, but he wasn't. He took me out because we had some privacy from her, and he said these incredible words. He said, you're gonna figure out one day that it's harder to be kind than clever. I spent an unusual amount of time with my grandparents, and especially with my grandfather on the ranch. So he had a ranch in South Texas, and I would spend my summers there from age 4 to 16. And when I was 4, they were taking me for the summer to kind of give my parents a break, sort of because they were so young, and it was useful. I was a handful, I'm sure, and anyway, he created the illusion for me when I was 4 years old that I was helping him on the ranch, which of course could not have been true, but I believed it. And then by the time I was 16, of course, I was actually helping on the ranch. I can fix prolapsed cattle. We did all of our own veterinary work. Some of the cattle even survived. And we fixed windmills and laid water pipelines and built fences and barns and fixed the bulldozer that you guys talked about. And so one of the things that's so interesting about that lifestyle and about my grandfather is he did everything himself. He didn't call a vet if one of the animals was sick. He figured out what to do himself. And
so what does it mean? No delegation?
Being resourceful, I think, is that you can't, if there's a problem, there's a solution. And of course, as you mature and get into the business world and anything you do on a team, you very quickly realize that it's not about just your own resourcefulness, it's about team resourcefulness and how does that work. And but that attitude of my grandfather's was but he was full of wisdom. John mentioned the story about the words my grandfather gave to me at one point of, it's harder to be kind than clever. That story, the slightly longer version of that story, because this was really powerful wisdom, is that I made my grandmother burst into tears. And the way I did it was we were driving on a long road trip, and she was a chain smoker. And I was probably, 10 years old, so this was around 1974. And it was in a period of time where there were heavy radio advertisements, sort of anti-smoking radio advertisements, trying to convince people to stop smoking. And one of the advertisements had this figure in it. It said something like, every puff of a cigarette takes so many minutes off of your life. I think it was 2 minutes, but I can't remember. Every puff of a cigarette. So I sat there in the back seat on this long car ride and calculated how many years she had taken off of her life. And in my 10-year-old mind, I had been extremely clever to do this. And so when I was finished with my arithmetic, I proudly announced to her how many years she had taken off of her life. And I got a reaction I did not expect, with her bursting into tears. And So my grandfather stopped the car and he took me out of the car, and I had no idea what was about to happen because he had never said a cross word to me. And I thought he might actually be angry with me, but he wasn't. He took me out because we had some privacy from her, and he said these incredible words that he said you're gonna figure out one day that it's harder to be kind than clever.
That's awesome. Now, for more from Jeff Bezos, simply search YouTube. Tons of great content there about Jeff. And be sure to visit his website, Amazon.com. Jeff's bestseller book, Tech Billionaires, can be found at his website and or Amazon.com. And I'll be sure to leave a link in the show notes. And remember, as the late great Jim Rohn used to say, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Today you've been hanging out with Jeff Bezos. Keep up the momentum. Subscribe to our newsletter so you never miss another episode. We'll catch you on the next show. And thanks a million for listening. See ya.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Expect Success Podcast with your host, George Bolling. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please rate, subscribe, and review. And find more great content online at georgebolling.com and on Facebook and Twitter at George Bolling. We'll catch you next time. And remember, don't just expect success, prepare for it.